Hello, listeners. This week, I was very privileged to go to Stratford upon Avon and talk to Emily Burns about her new feminist production of Measure for Measure. Now, you might think, Shakespeare, how important is that with everything else going on in the world? But honestly, this was such an interesting discussion. This play, although written in the early 1600s, is a Me Too play. And Emily talks about how every generation reinterprets this play, lets us know what's going on in their society. And there's an incredible video montage at the beginning of the production, which shows us clips from the news of contemporary men, right up through, of course, Epstein, who abuse their power. So this is a broader conversation. Even if you're not interested in Shakespeare or interested in this play or can get to see the play, it's a really, really interesting historical feminist conversation. I'd only seen the first half of the play on video before I got to do the interview, but that night I watched the play and I was really blown away by it. It's one of those productions of Shakespeare where you can absolutely understand everything everyone's saying. It just feels like a natural conversation. I wasn't bored for a minute, and you'll hear what Emily says about how she did this and why she did this and what the play is about as she interprets it and as this incredible cast interpret it. But it really did blow me away. If you can get to Stratford upon Avon, I hope it transfers to London and tours, but if you can get to Stratford upon Avon, I really, really can't recommend it highly enough. You will be gripped. And there's some really smart stuff she's done. I won't tell you more about that because she's going to tell you herself during the podcast. But I do genuinely think it's the most feminist production of this play I've ever seen, and it really works. She's a super, super talented director. So enjoy this historical feminist discussion that is somehow bang up to date. Live from the Royal Shakespeare Theatre in Stratford upon Avon, the Spontaneity Shop presents The Guilty Feminist with me, Deborah Frances-White, and my very special guest, Emily Burns, talking about the brand new feminist production of Measure for Measure. Hello, and welcome to the Royal Shakespeare Company here in Stratford upon Avon. It would be really wonderful if a play that was written in 1603 about a dictator who preaches purity but coerces a virgin unwillingly against her will into sex and then covers it up with corruption was out of date. It would really be lovely to think, well, we have nothing to learn from this but something historical. But it could not be more on point with what we're seeing in the news. So I am delighted to be joined on stage, on this very famous stage, by the director of Measure for Measure, who returns to the RSC following the success of her production of Love's Labour's Lost in 2024. Her previous theatre credits include Dear Octopus and Jack Absolute Flies Again at the National Theatre and many, many more. Please welcome to the stage the incredible Emily Burns. Welcome, come in. It's just a chat. You've not interrupted the theatre. This isn't proper. This is a discussion of theatre, so please feel free to heckle. I know you won't, because I know I've performed at Stratford quite a few times with my show, The Guilty Feminist, and I describe Stratford as an audience of head girls and head boys. Just by a show of hands if you were a head girl or a head boy. Yeah, that is way over the percentage that should be here, so I'm loving that. I'm loving that. Emily, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
How are you feeling about your show? Where are we in the whole process?
We are at the end of previews. Tonight is the final preview, which means it's the end of me being able to make unending changes, and I think the cast are ready for me to leave.
Right.
So that's good. But yes, we open tomorrow. And started together as a group 8 weeks ago now. And Daniel, Tamara and I talked about this for the first time about a year ago. So depending on your sense of time, we are at the end either way.
We're at the end of what you can do, but then the cast have to make it live for the duration of the run and any and all transfers. So you've done an incredible job at building this play and building this play into a production. It's obviously a very famous text, but could I just check here, who's already seen the play in preview? Oh, quite a lot of you. Who is yet to see it? More yet to see it. Okay, all right. So we're going to talk about it without giving spoilers on the production. Many of you, of course, will have seen it before in another production, but some of you... Has anyone not seen Measure for Measure at all and doesn't know what happens in Measure for Measure? Anybody doesn't know what happens in Measure for Measure? Okay, a few people... This is going to be a bit spoilery, but to be honest, you've had 400 years. What have you been doing? It's hardly Succession. So, could you give us a quick account of the plot as Shakespeare wrote it? You don't have to tell us the ending, because this person here, he's really not happy about that idea at all. He's just cover your ears and go la 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 la. But could you give us a quick idea of the plot? What happens?
Yes, I suppose at its core, a duke, the person in charge of a city, goes away for an indeterminate amount of time, leaving his deputy in charge.
Or does he?
His deputy reinstates some long-retired laws to crack down on fornication, sex before marriage. And the first person to fall afoul of that is a young man called Claudio, who implores his sister, Isabella, who is about to become a nun, to go and plead on his behalf to Angelo. Angelo meets Isabella meets Angelo, and Angelo decides, I will save your brother if you fornicate with me. And the play sort of takes that as its central, I suppose, dramatic conundrum. What should Isabella do? Consent. It's interesting, the line in it, fit thy consent to my sharp appetite. I don't want to rape you. I'd like you to agree to let me rape you, which is sort of an interesting idea.
I want you to want me.
I want you to want me.
Or at least let me.
I need you to need me. And so that's the kind of the centre of the plot is this. And the Duke, yes, has in fact stayed in Vienna disguised as a friar, and becomes aware of this central hypocrisy, and then tries to find a way to use that to his own advantage, to the city's advantage, to test Angelo, depending on which production you're looking at. I'm very nervous of these spoilers now, but that's sort of at the centre of the plot. And I suppose the other non-spoilery thing, particularly in this production, is that Angelo, in fact, had a fiancée 5 years ago called Mariana. Mariana lost her dowry, so he called off the marriage. But instead of saying that was the reason, he claimed that she had been unfaithful. The Duke is aware of this, and the Duke uses this history of Angelo's with Mariana to try and solve various problems, both of his own and Angelo's making. And I say that about our plot because this production, there is a huge undercurrent of other plots in the extant text from the 17th century, including a lot of prostitutes, a keeper of a brothel, a pimp, a set of characters called Froth and Elbow who spend some time in a court. None of that's in this production.
Right.
And so...
You've stripped it back from the more comedic elements because it's tonally tricky, isn't it? It's where they call it a problem play because... It's
tonally tricky. I think for me, it was... In our present society, which I think this play is really thinking about, in corruption in power and particularly abuse of power for sexual gratification, it's quite difficult, I think, to present this story and also present the idea that there is a separate seedy underbelly. Really, now, the seedy underbelly is existing at all levels.
One and the same.
And I didn't think that this story was being told in 2025 was best served by also grappling with questions of, sex workers in the present day. And so that current is gone in favour of this quite linear progress through the central plot.
And that brings us to a really, really interesting question. about how Shakespeare morphs and moves. Sometimes people say, oh, well, this is a very modern thing and you've changed the text and how dare you. But there is a tradition of changing Shakespeare in all sorts of ways, isn't there? Can you talk us through a little bit about how Shakespeare has been changed and morphed through other periods, not just our modern age?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is that Shakespeare himself is a changer and morpher. I mean, actually, our current ideas around copyright are incredibly modern. When you're looking at all of Shakespeare's plays, if you open a scholarly edition of any of them, it will begin with Shakespeare's sources, right, in which it this level of source is not just, oh, he heard this story and thought that could be the jumping off point. This is as detailed as, for example, in Antony and Cleopatra, there's a very famous speech about Cleopatra's arrival that is word for word the English translation of Plutarch that was available to Shakespeare at that time, where he's just every 10 syllables gone on to the next line. So
he's copied and pasted it.
He's copied and pasted, fully copied and pasted, collaborated with others, copied and pasted across different texts. And, that idea of Renaissance intertextuality is present in all of his contemporary dramatists. And then you get through to sort of the early 18th century, and the really famous example is a man called, I think it's pronounced Nahum Tate, produces versions of the tragedies with happy endings, because that's what audiences want. So King Lear with a marriage at the end. And this was the version of King Lear that was produced from 1704 through to, I think, 1848. And so that is what an entire, not one generation, not 2, 3, 4, 5 generations of people's experience of Shakespeare was King Lear, the marriage comedy. And then we get through to the present day present day, the modern era, and but I suppose particularly in the UK or in the West, of directors' theatre. And again, this is, I think, one of the things that perhaps isn't held on to quite as close as it should be is, even when I begin work on a Shakespeare, I can't go to the publisher to get the correct text. There may be quarto versus folio versions. Secondly, all punctuation is editorial. So really you pick up your Arden or your New Cambridge Shakespeare or your New Oxford Shakespeare or your Royal Shakespeare Company Jonathan Bate version, and that will be 4 different versions of the play. And depending on which play it is, that might be entire scenes are completely different, or it might just be about line breaks and punctuation. But my process always begins with 3 of those copies open in front of me, typing the text out myself, going, where does this comma go? Where does this full stop go? Without doing any editing of the text, and in going through that process, learning what the play is about. But you are, even at that stage, to get to a clear version of the text, making a myriad decisions that impact what the play is. And I think we also get into, the old questions about, well, it was actually all going to be performed by men, and the company was this big, and that's why there's this many parts. And so, I'm deeply reverential of the incredible capacity of some of these texts to speak from 400 years ago to the present day, and to describe in ways that have been, for some of them unmatched, the human experience. But I also don't think that there is a kind of true core at the middle of the Shakespeare apple that you are failing if you don't reach. There's just a lot of juicy flesh to choose between.
I agree, and I think the great thing about Shakespeare is he speaks to every age, but in a different way. What is beautiful about the poetry and the language is that it can reach through time, but what it said to Victorians is different from what it's saying to us, because there is so much nuance and so many different ideas in the words, in the text, in the poetry, in where we hesitate, in a decision, a physical decision that an actor will make. And you were telling me very interestingly that how Measure for Measure ends, what physicality that Isabella makes changes the ending, because there is famously silence from Isabella. Again, spoiler, Isabella is silent. But how she responds in her silence teaches us how different generations were engaging with the sexual politics of the age, So we learn about history through Shakespearean productions.
Yes, for better or worse, these plays are our record of where we are culturally, because they are the plays that have been produced so consistently for such a long period of time. So whether or not we want to get into debates about the number of Shakespeare productions that go on per year, or the idea of a building being based around, one man's work being central to its programming, the fact is these plays tell us who we are now and who we were 10 years ago and 20 years ago and 30 years ago and 50 years ago and 200 years ago, and will tell us who we are in relation to us now in the future. So they form, yes, this exact play, this question posed to Isabella at the end of the play, it is the mid 40s when the first production has a no-styled answer rather than a yes-styled answer. And then I could take you through the last 70 years in incredibly detailed record of how that question is posed and whether an audience is asked to think that the asking of the question is a positive or negative experience for Isabella. Those questions continue. Or just that line I gave you, fit thy consent to my sharp appetite. I dare say 50 years ago, the word consent wasn't necessarily the kind of bell ring in your mind as it is right now. And it's used twice in this play, once by Angelo to Isabella and once by a prisoner to the Duke. I will not consent to die today, which now sounds like he's taking the mick out of the idea of consent, and not something that would have been possible to do with the play until very, very recently. And so that the text hasn't changed, but how you receive it is fundamentally different.
But that is why Shakespeare is alive. That's why we are still producing plays and reinterpreting them, because that possibility lives within. And I think it's the answer to why... I think if Shakespeare came back now, he'd just be like, what? I was just a guy, there were loads of us, we're all sharing texts and doing plays, and there were lots of playwrights that were seen as good as Shakespeare. People then were only as good as their last hit, as you are now, to be fair, in Hollywood. And I think he would be astounded and a bit embarrassed by the response. But I do think the reason he lives, his work still lives, is exactly this, is that the word consent today lands differently. It was so well chosen at the time, but it lands differently for every generation. And I'm particularly interested in a production of Measure for Measure at this time. It's a play that I've avoided a lot in the past because I haven't really liked it. I've thought, there's this awful kind of core that you've described as who's going to believe you, which is really what Angelo says to Isabella. Because he's so puritanical and he's trying to bring in this old law of capital punishment for fornication. And the young man in question, Claudio, is engaged to this woman, to this young woman. They want to be together, but they're not technically married, and she's pregnant. And so he's going to kill him. But they want to be together. It was consensual, using that word again. And they were as married, and nobody else thought this was an appropriate punishment or thing to do. But he was bringing back these old school values. And this is so much of what we're seeing in America at the moment, this idea of the family unit and the heteronormative family unit, and a lot of the rhetoric we've been seeing this week come out of America. But then, of course, what bubbles up underneath that is when Claudio's sister, Isabella, comes to see him and say, please don't kill my brother. He's pregnant with this woman's child. They're in love. She's pregnant, etc., etc., etc. He looks at her and goes, I want you. She's a virgin who is becoming a nun. She's a novice nun. And he says, sleep with me or I'll kill your brother. And the sort of what's bubbling up underneath again and again and again and again and again, I see these news reports coming out of America that somebody who has been very homophobic, very loud about old-fashioned values for women being in the kitchen pumping out babies, has again and again and again and again and again been found guilty of having child pornography, been found guilty of soliciting a minor, been found guilty of a homosexual act in a public place with somebody that they've solicited or something like that. Every single time you just go, oh my God, this is happening again and again, that there's something bubbling up. And it feels now like the time that I was dying to talk to you about this, and I was dying to see what you had done with it, because suddenly it seems like not a play where I go, oh, do I want to watch that? But something where I go, I'm compelled to watch it. What were the feminist themes in it that drew you to it? Or how did you see this as like a sort of play that you, as a woman, wanted to direct? What did you want to get your teeth into here?
Yeah, so one of the things that I think is usually central to the play is this Isabella as a nun, and I think the love of God or decision to enter the priory as a kind of a priori fact of the play that we don't need to interrogate further. Why has she made that decision? Well, who knows? She's become a nun, but I was really interested in why has she made that decision. And there was a great exhibition at the British Library at the end of last year, Medieval Women in Their Own Words, and some quite incredible records of women in priories in the 14th and 15th centuries. And the description they have of it themselves is of the ability to speak and read and not make babies and engage in debate and not be shouted down and decide how they are governed themselves. And this is sort of conjecture, but, you know, no man would enter a priory, but men would sometimes enter monasteries and discover that it was sort of bacchanalian, the kind of incredible fun these men were having together. Now they didn't have to deal with the rest of the world. And I sort of imagined this priory that you close the door to and they're all like, nah, the wimple's off, it's great. I'm not saying that, but it made me think about the priory as a form of escape. And her very first line, Isabella's line to Francisca, the nun she walks into, is, and have you nuns no farther privileges? Are these not large enough? No, truly I speak not as desiring more, but wishing a more strict restraint upon the sisterhood. And that's always, I think, historically been viewed as Isabella looking for absolutism and moral purity. But I was thinking about what it would be to try to leave the world behind now. Where would you go? And when you got there, having decided to leave the world behind, how you would be checking that you weren't going to be asked to re-engage with it. I want to be in here and I don't want to come back out again. So in this production, we really conceptualized of the priory as a form of escape. And that in itself became an escape from systemic injustice, I suppose chiefly patriarchal injustice, but more broad systemic issues in which the choice to fight comes at a great personal cost to the individual. Isabella having given up on that and wanting to escape it and being pulled back out. You notice these 4 moments in the play when she almost gets away. She almost gets into the priory, and then she's asked to help her brother. She almost leaves her brother, and then she's asked something by the Duke. She almost leaves the Duke, and then she's asked something by him again. But there are these multiple attempts to essentially exit the play, or in this sense, exit the world. I want to be in a different environment. And then in thinking about, well, what's she escaping and why does she want to escape? I actually thought about Claudio, and you've very accurately described how some of the text talks about Claudio and Juliet's relationship as being one of love and engagement. But I noticed in the text that the reason Claudio says he's not engaged to Juliet yet is because she can't yet get access to her dowry. And the reason that Angelo didn't marry Mariana is because she couldn't get access to her dowry. And I suppose there's both a contemporary idea of not recognizing a woman's value as the parallel, but there's also just a specific in-text parallel. Claudio and Angelo have both made a promise and then not gone through with it because they're not going to receive what they think they're entitled to. And that made me start thinking of Claudio as not quite so nice a guy. And then once I'd understood that, well, what Isabella might be escaping from became clearer again. I think the further kind of evolution that's come from the brilliant company as we've worked through it is a recognition that this play is sort of a dramatization of what happens when you only think about yourself. There is really no collaborative action in this play. People don't get together to try and deal with the problem. They try and deal with the problem on their own, or they try and tell other people to do things to solve it. But no one sits down together and says, what should we do? It's always go you and do this. And there are crucial moments in the play where if one person was to answer a question or ask a question, the plot would fall apart. The kind of the Machiavellian element of it would be impossible. And that made me think a lot about this exact period, I suppose 2024 versus 2016, or the move from collective action to particularly this American administration, and how can you respond to it? And as the cost to individuals and the potential for more and more people to suffer has increased, it feels like the need to protect yourself, to put your own oxygen mask on before helping others, has felt more acute. But the outcome of that is fewer oxygen masks are being put on others. And this play is kind of what happens if nobody puts someone else before themselves. And there was one scene in it that I thought was missing, and so I've made that scene out of a lot of other Shakespeare's. So they're all his words. They're just not necessarily from the right play or in the right order. It's smarter than that, but it is a bit copy and paste. No, it's good, but there's one...
But we've established there's a precedent of that.
There's a precedent for that. Also, there's just a missing scene. You all know what a bed trick is, maybe. Renaissance plays are filled with them, which is where, like, the biggest fear you could have as a man is, oh no, what if the wrong woman comes in to have sex with me and I don't notice, and then I'm in trouble, or I have to marry her. So bed tricks abound in the Renaissance. And in this play, a bed trick is proposed, and Isabella's being called in to do this bed trick, and the Duke has said, I'll tell her about it, and then you come along. And then she comes along, and he goes, I haven't told her about it. And normally in the play, he sends them off to talk. And he stays on stage and gives you 6 lines about the nature of power, and they come back on and go, yeah, definitely up for it. And I was like, what is that conversation? So that was in there. But what I was going on to try to get to was that in finding these lines from Shakespeare's women in particular, to think about what this scene might be, firstly, there are the 2 first lines Isabella say in that scene are... pardon me, I cannot speak, I cannot say the words, which there are 7 different women in 7 different Shakespeare plays that say those lines. So that's it's not a me problem, it's a him problem. But also the end of that scene, in thinking about this individualism, is not Shakespeare. The final 4 lines are written by Mary, Queen of Scots, while imprisoned in the Tower, about the nature of rebelling when you're being oppressed. So I apologise for Mary's words creeping in, and I hope you'll forgive me.
I feel quite delighted that a woman's words are sneaking into this missing scene, that perhaps Shakespeare thought, well, I don't know how one woman convinces another woman to get into bed in the dark, so a man will come and have sex with her, thinking he's having sex with another woman. Just do that off stage. Yeah. It's a bit like a battle. Often Shakespeare does that. Someone crawls on and goes, the battle's it's terrible out there. You should see it. We can't afford it. We haven't got the budget, but I'll tell you. Yeah. I'll tell you about it. Legions of men, horses dead everywhere. You should have been there. And similarly, he's gone, what do women say when I'm not there? Well, I'll never know. Yeah. Let's have them do it off stage, and then I'll have a man talk about power for a while. And I think it's a really wonderful thing to go through, and also it's quite academically rigorous to go through and find other times when women have been allowed to speak and put a piece together. But I love that you've ended with words from Mary, Queen of Scots, from life, who felt this very keenly.
There's also actually one line from Aphra Behn, a female precursor to Shakespeare, which gets a good response each night. Kings who made laws first broke 'em. Which, qua your opening comments about the pertinency of the play, feels like somebody speaking to us from 475 years ago saying, yep, that sounds about right.
The more things change, my God, the more they stay the same. So can I ask, what's the response from the audience been like so far in the previews?
Very exciting. I think my favourite has been, we had about 40 sixth formers come on Friday night, who are always your most discerning audience. They're going to let you know if they're bored, and if they don't understand it, and then they'll find a reason they need to leave. Blah, blah, blah. But they were riveted and then really screamed at the end about it. And actually, Bellaray, who's been working with you on the play, did some work with them the following morning and said their engagement with the decision-making process within the play, and actually a real conversation about pragmatist feminism versus idealist feminism was thrilling. I also got an email on that day from a 95-year-old friend of mine saying how much she'd enjoyed it. So I think if we're doing 19 and 90, it's going to be fine. But I enjoy, there's a lot of gasping. There's a bit in the play without any words in it, maybe 2.5 minutes at the end of the first act. And if you sit on this side, you can see one person's face in it. If you sit on that side, you can see the other person's face. And that double reaction is fascinating.
Oh, interesting.
As you engage with different versions of what your perception of that event might be.
So, and if you're listening from somewhere around the world, we're in a theatre that's thrust. So there are people having different views around, and that's what Emily's referring to. Can I ask, the conversation that you referenced about pragmatic versus radical or idealist feminism that filtered through this play, which you said was fascinating, was there anything that you could tell us about that?
About their conversation, well, I can't without upsetting our spoiler friend, but you're so popular in this now. I suppose it was about, in the scene composed about the bed trick, the debate is basically between these two women is, should or shouldn't you participate in this? What level of self-subjugation or alignment with something that you know is not working in your favour is worth it to secure yourself versus some sort of greater benefit? So that's the kind of, you should do this, it will help you personally. I won't do this because it would be bad generally. That's the kind of debate that's happening. And the play ends with that question very present. And I think the debate between them was, I can't believe she's gone through that and not going to get any money at the end of it, which was sort of a fascinating insight into I don't know, retributive justice or reparations or ideas around, I suppose, economic pragmatism in the current, financial climate we find ourselves in. But that seemed to be very present in their minds.
I think that's a very young person view at the moment, which is, if I'm going to do something, I want to be paid for my labour. And that could be emotional labour, that could be trauma labour, but if I'm going to choose to do it, what am I going to get? And that is quite a young and modern idea, but it's so interesting that sixth formers are coming and they're engaging with it. Again, Shakespeare lives because they're engaging with it at the place that they are, and it's meeting them where they are. There's just so much in it. Now, we've got a few minutes left if anybody would like to ask a question. There's a question there.
Hi, I want to ask you about a comment you made right at the start of your talk, where you said that you excluded the sex workers, the sort of low-life, midlife at the start of the play, and you gave the reasons. How did it? What problems did that present to you in terms of the balance of the play? Because they're a high, maybe they're a short bit at the start, but they're a high element of comedy in the play. And if you take them out, does it affect the balance of the play, or what did you think?
Yes, they are historically comic. It's quite a lot of talking about women being gross, which is not my sort of at the heart of the stuff that I find funny. So maybe unfortunately we're all suffering from my gender bias there. I think also there is a kind of, having done a comedy here last year, the work it takes to make that text fun when so much of the wordplay in it is completely removed from our vocabulary, is a lot. And in terms of the balance, I think I was actually quite keen to tip the balance into this much more linear form, partly because once you remove them, this is sort of the most one after another play of Shakespeare's, other than maybe Comedy of Errors, which has its own 24-hour format. This really is, this event happens and we go to this scene, this event happens and we go to this scene, this event happens and we go to this scene, and there's no sort of, here are these other people and we're going to meet them at the end. But I think I'd also, when I first started working on this, had been thinking about what's holding our attention outside of theatre, and the kind of the prevalence of the sort of thriller-based mini-series was in my mind. The idea that we sort of have a capacity for something with a really sharp incline in drama, and I thought this play could achieve the cleanliness of that in a way that would allow these bigger ideas to be posed with a very distinct question rather than an amorphous one.
So you went for the more true crime or the crime thriller, the Scandi crime thriller way of thinking about it.
Yeah, Scandi noir, measure for measure.
It is a bit of a weird tone mix for us now to have all of this broad comedy and then this really nasty Epstein thing going on in the middle, that you kind of go, oh, that's a hard... And as you say, all Shakespeare comedies, some of them are so... If you get it right, they're so funny, but it's hard to get it right. I've been at a lot of Shakespearean comedies where everyone's been going, ha, 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 ha. I understand that. I've got a glossary, and it needs to be alive. So I'm very excited to see. I've seen a video of this production, so I could do this today, but I'm going to watch it tonight.
It's also a lot about how you're going to rehearse it. There's really 11 named parts. Well, there's 13 named parts in this version of it, played by 11 people plus 2 others, and you know, every actor is coming into the rehearsal with so much commitment to what they're doing, and it's quite galling when you have to say to somebody, sorry, you're just a whore in the background. If you could just be over there, that would be great. I don't enjoy that. So that's, you know, that is also part of it.
That's really, really interesting, because sex work is such a very important and current conversation now, and it's a much more fluid business as well, with OnlyFans and all sorts of other outlets. It deserves its own conversation. It can't really be a comic side dish, I think, at this time in history. So I think it's a really interesting...
And you're always with Shakespeare trying to cut technology out, because once you've got an email, you can't have a plot because they'd send an email instead. And so that would be quite difficult to both try and do what is OnlyFans and also say he has to send this message by person and it takes 4 hours and he misses this bit instead.
So true. Although, what is a bedroom trick if not a catfish?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, discuss. We've got time for one more question, or 2 if you answer quickly, Emily.
I'll try.
This is more of a request than a question. Can I get you on my program, please?
Big time. We can do that.
Okay. All right, so can we have your question while the programme's being assigned? Oh, okay. This has turned into an unofficial programming assigning. Okay.
The question I was going to ask, because I work with survivors myself, and I studied this play for A-level, and my opinion of Isabella and her position has massively shifted over the time. And I'm just wondering, given this is going to be very much almost a post-Me Too kind of interpretation, I'm wondering if in years to come, do you think that it may flip back again to more sort of, I don't know, more patriarchal kind of interpretations? Or do you think that because we know what we know now, that interpretations of this play will stay in this kind of mode, if you like?
It's a very good question. I suppose history tells us Angelo's actions have always been condemned in this play. The Duke's status has always been up for discussion. And I suppose a question about how how much does he value the personhood of the women involved in the plot that he puts forward is something that we've seen a big shift in the mid-20th century and then has oscillated. I think there's certainly the potential to view him as a moralizing figure, creating a godlike test with his omnipotence to ensure purity is maintained. I suppose that depends whether the director and or creative's own political view of that type of test is that it is abhorrent or necessary. But it has been interesting thinking about, to your mention of survivors, thinking about this play in terms of what happens in that bed trick. We do a version of it on stage to think through how you would do that today. And actually then the beginning of the second half and some of the costuming in the second half is really trying to consider what would it be to have to take part in that, and how would you either try and hide yourself or arm yourself having been through that. Whereas normally you just keep the wimple on the whole time and you're done. So yes, I hope, but I don't know.
Emily, would you sign those? They've both got a Sharpie in at the right page.
Excellent.
And as Emily does that, I will just read you this quote, which is from the Duke, Act 3, Scene 1. Has it survived? We'll find out. Oh, what may man within him hide, though angel on the outward side? And I really do think that speaks to a lot of the politics we're seeing today. They're hiding in plainer and plainer sight, and it is getting quite scary. And I feel like this play and this production of this play is really addressing those things head on. And I really encourage as many people as possible to come and see it, and to engage with it, and hopefully it'll get a transfer as well, because I think that we are at a time when, if we're engaging with archaic texts, it needs to be because we are asking ourselves very, very current questions and how we might shape our own society, as Shakespeare tried to do with his art. Emily, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is there anything you came to say that you didn't get to say?
I would just bounce off what you've said to say, I think that we've talked a lot about this in the company, that theatre right now is one of the last places we have left in which, when you sit down and start to watch it, if you don't like it, you sort of have to stay and see it out. And that, yes, that is funny, and we've all been stuck there. But also the stratification and ossification of socio-political viewpoints is a result of only being shown things that we already agree with, and only being exposed to people who already hold the opinions we hold, and being able to turn off or flip away from those we disagree with. And so I implore, you're all already here, so well done, but anyone listening, if you want to engage with how we might go back, we might move towards a better idea of society and community, coming to see something that you don't agree with and being forced to sit through the whole 2 hours and not scroll is a really good way to start.
Absolutely. And it turns your brain on in a different sort of way. The fact you can't flip away from it. You can't go, oh, we've tried this thing on Netflix, but we've done 5 minutes, we don't like it. You have to sit and engage, and it does something different to your brain. So the more we can get in rooms, whether that's theatre, whether that's discussions like today, whether that's book groups, whether whatever it is, the more we can come together as communities and sit and engage our brains in a longer way than this, flipping and double screening, the better we will be as a society. So we congratulate you for coming out today, and we thank everyone who's listening at home for staying with us through this. And Emily, I'm so excited to see this live tonight. As I said, I've seen a recording of it, and I thought it was absolutely incredible, and I can't wait to see it live. And I can't wait to see what you do next. Do you know what you'll be doing next? Anything else we can follow you into? Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Emily Burns, everybody. My name's Deborah Frances-White. It's probably quite late in the day to say that. My name's Deborah Frances-White, and I do a podcast called The Guilty Feminist. There'll be a recording of this on the Guilty Feminist podcast soon, so you'll be able to hear this back. If you had a question, you'll be able to hear yourself. And if you would like to subscribe to that podcast and you can hear other things, there's a recent interview I did with Susie Miller, who wrote Inter Alia, who also wrote Prima Facie. There's various cultural things, also political discussions, lots of comedy on it. Please review, subscribe, rate, do all those things you're meant to do for podcasts. Tell your friends with your face. I also read a book called 6 Conversations We're Scared to Have about this exact thing, polarisation, fragmentation, why we keep fighting each other on the left. And so if you'd like to buy a copy of that, that's great. The podcast is free, the book is not. Please buy it. Thank you so much, and thank you for supporting the RSC. It's really important that you do. Good afternoon. You have been listening to The Guilty Feminist with me, Deborah Frances-White, and my very special guest, Emily Burns. The Guilty Feminist theme tune was composed by Mark Hodge. The producer was Tom Salinsky for The Spontaneity Shop. Thank you to Ned Sedgwick, Gina Dicio, Zaina Mohammed, and everyone at the RSC, as well as all of you for listening. For more information about this and other episodes, visit guiltyfeminist.com. Measure for Measure is playing at the Royal Shakespeare Theatre in Stratford upon Avon until the 25th of October 2025.